This episode of Capes and Lunatics is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. Get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
Me hearties, yes, salty landlubbers, welcome to Full Stream Ahead. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend,
Mozz.
Hey, Mozz. Oh, Mozzie! It's the end of the road. It's Season 1, Episode 8 of The Boys.
Oh, boy.
You found me, Mozz. You found me. That's our title. You found me. The season finale time. Questions answered. Secrets revealed. Conflicts conflicted. Characters exploded. And so much more. Our director, of course, is the excellent Eric Kripke. He did last episode too. No, actually, where was he writer? I don't know. Kripke's great. I do
Officer
preemptive.
Krip you.
Yes, Krip you. Krip you, Eric Kripke. To me, right now, I'm calling you my hardest working man in show business this week. He also did the develop by, so he's the guy who made all of this a reality.
I'm getting the sense that overall for the show, that guy is going to be who takes it.
Yeah, I got a feels. We'll talk about that at the end of the show.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, our writing credits go to Ann Cofield-Saunders and Rebecca Sonnenschein, who is my Shonenshine, my only Shonenshine. Makes me happy when skies are gray. No, both Rebecca and Ann get our written by credits. Of course, Eric Kripke is getting that developed by again. And Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson get our based on the comic books by credit. Oh my goodness, what an episode. Now, of course, those of you who listened to the last episode, you may have thought we already reviewed this episode because we pretty much mushed the two together. The penultimate episode, Take a Drink, and the ultimate episode got kind of mixed up in me and Mozz's heads. Maybe we should keep our brains a little less mush before we do these podcasts. But
perhaps, yeah.
But
in any case, I think we left the meat of everything alone. There was some stories, I guess, that were integral or finished off a thought from the previous episode that I guess we got into. But I think the meat of what this episode is about, we left alone.
Well, you know what I'll say is I really get the feeling in both these cases it's one arc between these two episodes.
Right.
It's so, and within the relationships, because again, for the Deep and for Starlight, who, it's kind of funny if you think about it. This series kind of has bookends with the Deep and Starlight for some reason, and I don't quite know why. We have the Deep and Starlight at the start of it. We have them at the end of it, kind of reversing their own spots. To be fair. But also, maybe seeing how life is more complicated than it seems. We'll get to them in a minute, but this episode opens up with
kind of the BA superhero scene we've been waiting for. A little bit. They tease it a little bit with letting, Homelander go a little nuts, but even this is still so reserved relative to what I'm sure he's capable of. But it was nice to see him, just wreck town a little bit.
I don't know. It's sort of, to me, it's really punching down.
Well, no, obviously. I'm just saying as a character that powerful, I want to see him express that power. I want to see some violence. I want to see some superpowered, lasers and punching and whatnot, and we haven't gotten that just yet. And so it was nice to get a little bit of that here.
But I don't know. You know what it is? Here's my problem with it. It's all manufactured. It is 1000% manufactured because we already, actually, and this was kind of the gag of it because we talked about this last episode. It actually gets revealed this episode that that compound V he's finding there, he's the one who put it there. Now,
right, or he might have even brought it there. It might just be part of a PR campaign. That might have been a legit sell. I mean, obviously they were packaging heroin, so they were legit bad guys, and the military was about to overtake them. And he said, "Hey, I got this one, and plus I'm just going to plant this real quick, just to make things easier." I think it'd be easier than leading the military to attack a base they were going to attack, and having that be the site of your experiments. So
And you know what I think is telling about it? You really know what is the most telling aspect of this?
What's that?
The super isn't there. They're not tracking down the super.
Right. This isn't like, it's just a random mission, right?
Yeah, it's clearly a random mission because the SEAL Team 24 was there, ready to take the place, and then Homelander shows up to basically just make himself feel big, which is like you play basketball against midgets. You're not as impressive as you think you are.
Well, yeah.
And that's essentially what he's doing. He's playing basketball against midgets, and
right. I'm not saying that it's anything to be lauded as showing character or anything. I'm just saying it's cool to see a bad guy do bad guy things.
Well, fair enough that he is being a bad. So if we're on the page, he is the bad guy. So if we do accept that he is the villain of the piece.
Oh, without a doubt. He is the big threat. He is the big baddie of the entire show, and the universe is coalesced around him in a way, out of fear, placating him with whatever they can to get him to stay calm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I get that. I guess to me, it's kind of the madness of King George. It's the idea of, we have a mad king who basically, fell bass-ackwards into power. And now all we have to do is be desperately afraid of him unleashing his wrath. Honestly, not to get political, but I kind of feel if this stuff wasn't written like, a year in advance, I'd say, man, this is some great political satire. And this is probably I've seen that scene before, Tristan. It's Jar Jar Binks coming out as the actual anyway, non sequiturs. But if this stuff hadn't been written like years ago, I would say this is the most clear political satire of our current situation, of people just placating an omnipotent baby in their minds as what we see here. Because this is, I mean, like I say, it's bad, especially when taken as a whole. Because even at this point, because this is the thing, the big scary reveal that we actually talked about last episode, where we find out that Homelander was the one distributing the drug, distributing the compound.
Right.
We thought that happened last episode. No, that's not true now. So many things happen this episode that really define where we're going. And among the things that define where we're going are the deep after being sexually assaulted in the last episode and coming to his own rock bottom and doing the whole shaving his body, shaving his head, and then regretting it, and then just feeling worthless. It's powerful in its own way.
I thought the way it was acted was wonderful too, where he's sitting there and it really seems like it's an idea that just happens. There's one of those weird sparks you get when you're in a stifling situation and you get really uncomfortable and you have like the wildest, craziest thought in your head. You don't do it, but it pops into your head out of nervousness. What if you were to do this? Or and you see that moment land on his. He just goes with one quick swipe, and then he immediately regrets it, and then hates himself more for being so weak to having allowed that to happen, and then just goes it's such a beautifully, beautifully acted moment.
Here's what I'm going to say. I don't know how many seasons they're going to do with this. But I do wonder if they're going to build out a redemption arc in some way for the Deep in this. Like, as I said last episode, how dare they make me feel so much pity for this guy?
Yeah.
But I wonder if, so, as an example, one of the things we get in this is, of course, Starlight coming around to being a hero. And and this idea that, you know, it doesn't matter. And I really feel like so much of this is people that didn't ask for superpowers, but that have them and being told what they're supposed to do with them. And, you know, honestly, it's real interesting that they haven't had a supervillain up until now, but I'm guessing that a lot of beings are culled early. If you understand my phrase on that, that basically a lot of people that were a real threat were dealt with quicker. And it's only Homelander's basically randomized trials that are creating things that will be actual threats for everyone, that could actually scare people, that could actually put us on the brink of an Armageddon again.
So it's kind of like they were so careful with their planning and rolling out of the experiment that they were careful never to let risk be too high, except in his case. And now he's taken everything out of the bounds of their control schemes, and they have no idea what can happen now.
Exactly.
Now we might see the full expression of the Compound V.
Essentially, he has been an unknowing Ethel Rosenberg. You know, he is basically took the atom bomb that Vought had in its little cell as if it were the formula for Coca-Cola. And, you know, of only 2 people will know half the ingredients kind of situation. And then just, you know, handed it out like candy. And now we're in a superhumanly empowered world. And now the threat is real. Now the threat of superhumans going nuts is suddenly a real threat. Because, as I say, from one of the greatest comic books ever written, Dark Claw #1 from the Amalgam Universe, the problem with creating a living weapon is that a weapon normally can't pick itself up off the table and decide to just start killing people. And essentially what they did was they created a living weapon, and the living weapon got bored and decided, you know what, I want other living weapons to play with. I want ones that I can wrestle with, because I like to wrestle. And, you know, Queen Maeve, who is as close to an equal as he has, you know...
I don't know about that, because didn't she break her arm holding up a bus? You know?
Well, I don't know. How big is a bus?
I mean, I feel like it would be like Pinky's worth of work for Homelander, no?
I don't... Well, you see that... Well, see, that's always that thing. He has laser eyes. So...
And he's, like, super strong, right?
He is super strong, but we also heard him sing about, like, the torque of the airplane, yada, yada, yada.
Well, that's true, I guess.
All those physics questions that it's like, you know... That's the thing, is, like, they're still bound by the laws of physics. They may have super strong bones. You know, that's always that thing about, you know, how King Kong's, like, ankles would break. It's like, well, no, they wouldn't, because clearly they didn't. So obviously, however he evolved, his ankles were stronger than a normal gorilla's ankles.
Right.
Continuing to that, people say that Godzilla can't be true because the weight of him would kill him.
Well, exactly. It's the same idea. It's the idea that, oh, this creature couldn't go from the water to the land. Tristan was speaking about Godzilla right there.
Right.
That, you know, a creature that size that existed in the water. First off, Godzilla doesn't exist in the water. He just was coming from the water. But the idea that because he is a water creature, he couldn't come onto land and have his bones be strong enough. Unless, you know, part of its life cycle was to do that, you know?
Right. I think the gripe they basically had was a creature that size, his posture wouldn't be proper in that manner.
Well, except it makes the assumption about... So, for example, you could look at human bones. If you found human bones, you would say, well, this being couldn't possibly walk upright. It would have constant back pain. Well, guess what? Humans have constant back pain because we walk upright.
Plus, Dad, I have a question.
What's your question, Tristan?
I don't get why people say, just because wouldn't our bones be able, wouldn't they feel normal because, that's how our bones are made?
Well, that's exactly my point. Is that if you evolve to be that creature, you can't look at a thing that's existing and say you can't possibly exist. You can't look at a Bigfoot and say Bigfoots aren't real. You don't exist. It's like, well, no, there's a Bigfoot standing in front of you. Clearly they exist. Maybe now you have to explain why a Bigfoot exists.
Right. So by creating this character, you have also consequentially created a evolutionary lineage for that creature as well.
Exactly. So once you create the monster has to exist.
Right.
And then you have essentially it's the no prize rule of science. That you can't look at something that's existing in front of you and say it doesn't exist. And I mean certainly you can say, well, maybe people hallucinated or maybe it was mass hysteria. Fair enough. But when it steps into your lab and it's the freaking, gray alien, now you're going to say, well, I guess you're a green alien, a gray alien, and now we got to discuss what that means for everything else.
Right.
Yes, Tristan.
I feel like in the Mandalorian thing, I think I would.
Okay, Tristan definitely wants us to talk about Mandalorian. So I definitely think after we do our little sorbet of the Black Mirror, I think we should go into the Mandalorian.
I'm with it. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're going to do a quick sorbet of the Black Mirror, and then we're going to go right into the Mandalorian after that. Okay, but back to this episode. Oh, no, it's okay, Tristan. You're a part of everything, as you always are in my life. Back to this episode. So within this entire storyline, within this entire concept, so what I was saying, to get back to my last actual thought, what I was saying about the Deep is I think because Deep isn't the Aquaman pesty, the writers may decide to give him a redemptive moment with Homelander in the second season or later where he gets to show he is strong. He's just always in. So, for example, we don't know if Homelander breathes. We've never seen Homelander in space, as an example. Which means you get into the water. And, of course, it's like, oh, heat vision. Well, that's not going to do much in the water, dude. It's like when you shoot bullets into the water, the waters put so much resistance on the bullets, they're basically useless.
Right.
And
there's lasers that can operate underwater, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, but to shine a light on something, yes. But to be a burning cutting laser?
I think so.
Well, essentially what happens is the energy hits the molecules of that surface water and they immediately evaporate. And
I don't know, but if there's enough of a concentration of it, I think, because they have like these torches that cut metal underwater.
Oh, yeah, but that's actually a different kind of torch. That's a magnesium.
Right, so I can imagine they have.
So essentially, if Homelander is underwater, and that's the trick. If Homelander is underwater and right next to the Deep, he could certainly laser eye him. But if Homelander goes underwater and the Deep is behind him and puts him into a half Nelson,
right,
or a full Nelson, you would need to do a full Nelson in that situation.
Right.
If the Deep underwater is as strong as Homelander and then can swim, it's when you put your arms under someone's armpits and then put your hands behind their head so that you're holding them down so they can't move their arms, and then swims them underneath the water.
It's a classic bully move.
Oh yeah. It's an actual wrestling move.
Of course, but it's a classic bully move.
Well, but it's also it's a perfectly legal hold. Don't tell me a Nelson is not a legal hold. Okay.
Well, most certainly.
That's not a chokehold. That's not even a sleeper. That's just a perfect submission hold.
I've even recently discovered that there's something as a quarter Nelson. Who'd have figured?
I can't even imagine what a quarter Nelson might be.
I remember looking at it and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. I guess it is kind of a quarter Nelson. It's like where it's from. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something
from like the front, but it's like one hand.
Well, it's from the side, sort of like you do it like the arm around with the other arm under your own armpit and sort of kind of like pushing it back. So it's kind of like
okay, yeah, I
pressure.
can see that. Yeah.
Something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember seeing, oh my God, there's even a quarter Nelson. I wonder if there's an eighth Nelson.
It makes you wonder who Nelson was, because this guy was apparently one of the greatest wrestlers who ever lived.
Very clearly, yeah.
Nelson. That's probably why they named the bully in The Simpsons Nelson Muntz. I'm going to go out on a limb on that one. Anyway, so I think you might get him on. I don't think he's going to beat Homelander, but I think he's going to be integral into whatever defeat might come to Homelander.
See, I think people like that, the only redemption that is usually afforded them is to sacrifice themselves and make that play in order to save somebody else, and then maybe we can have redemption for him. But it's not going to be something that makes him grow or keeps him around. He's got to like give in order to get redemption. He can't do well and feel good about himself and get to live with that. That's not the kind of redemption I think that's in store for him.
No, and I agree, but I think the maybe caveat to that is he's aware that's the only redemption he can have. That when you are a being who is so separate from humanity and knows how dead you are inside, that the only way that you can actually say I have worth is to sacrifice yourself in that moment. Not to be, so many people kind of maybe even think that when they make a bad decision about their lives. But, so certainly if you're thinking about doing that, please call a hotline.
Unless you're a samurai, then, do what you got to do.
Well,
I'm kidding.
Unless the Emperor of Japan declared you a samurai, you ain't a samurai, okay? I'm just saying, you're not a knight of the table round unless King Arthur freaking put Excalibur on your shoulder for 5 minutes, Let's call a shelter having an entrenching tool. I can say I'm a professor all day long. It's a meaningless honorific. I don't call myself a knight or a samurai, I don't call myself Charlie the Samurai Esser, because that's an honorific that has some weight behind it and has meaning.
Right.
Unless the Japanese emperor has decided that I get a feudal domain of which to rule as a warlord, I am not a samurai. I am not a shogun. That's the emperor of China giving you that feudal domain.
What's a shogun?
It's essentially a Chinese samurai.
What's a ronin?
A ronin is a samurai without a master, which means someone who was at one point a samurai or who trained to be a samurai, but then fell out of favor with the Emperor of Japan or some other feudal lord that was making sort of little samurais. So that's what a ronin is. That's why ronins usually don't have proper armor.
Well, then what about all of the ronin in Star Wars? Like there's ronin.
Well, because Star Wars uses a lot of cultural appropriation of Japanese medieval mythology. So yeah, Lucas uses the word ronin like it's going out of style. as a lot of fans of Kurosawa do. And to be fair, it's not even necessarily cultural appropriation any more than saying, he's a knight of something is cultural appropriation, because there's no knights in America, but, we've gotten that English mythos that is not relevant to a lot of people's history, but we're going to go play it into it, So, but anyway, that's that whole conversation. Where were we?
The Deep's redemptive arc and where that goes. Yeah. And I think one of the scenes I thought was brilliant and I really wanted to talk about was the scene where Starlight confronts her mother. And she goes, her mother comes in and is about to give her breakfast, and she goes, "What's compound B?" That little hesitation, that tiny moment of recognition, and then the effort it takes to cover it up and continue on like nothing happened and make the waffles. It was so perfect. And that woman is a phenomenal actress. Ann Cusack. And I love that scene because she's such a great actress. That scene felt really, really real. And then when Starlight storms out, you get, what you think is going to be the rote obligatory scene where no Annie, but it felt real. And like unlike in most other shows, you don't just stop. She chased after her, went to the door, and would not stop calling for her to come back. So it didn't seem like she was saying Annie because the lines told her to. It really felt like she was begging for Annie to come back and continue the conversation. I thought that scene was great.
Yeah,
and I thought Anne Cusack was perfect in that.
I mean, to be fair, there's a conversation to be had, and there's a real story here, which is that, I made a choice because I had to make a choice. Someone said you could have something more, and I was a person in dire straits, and it's not like they were saying it. First off, I doubt there was a full disclosure, at this. Because never know. This is probably, well, actually, I mean, you have to jump it ahead now because she was probably born in like late 90s. So there probably were proper. Well, in our world, there's proper laws about what you have to tell someone about before you give them an experimental drug. But in this universe, who knows? It's like the Watchmen universe. They never passed another.
Yeah, but technically that drug doesn't exist, so there aren't any laws to govern its implementation.
Well, there again, yes. So it becomes very. So they probably had them sign something that said, "I acknowledge that this is a illegal drug that I'm giving to my child, and I accept all risks therein."
Right.
In little Latin boilerplate, So yeah, but at the same time, it also worked out really nicely because her daughter did become some crazed sociopathic monster. She became a superpowered, amazing superhero.
Yeah, and it's like when she says, "How much did they pay you?" She was in her mind when she played that moment out before she got there to have that conversation with her mom. That was sort of the linchpin of her anger. She was waiting for that to be exactly what she thought her mother was in that moment, that she took the money for it. When she says there was no money, I simply did it because I thought it would be best for you. I was, and there you see Starlight take a moment where she turns her head and thinks to herself, wait, what? There was no money? So what then? And she softens for a second, but then finds her anger again. And I thought that was a beautifully done scene.
And it makes sense in the idea that it wasn't about the money. They weren't paying her to experiment on her child, because not for nothing, if you said, "I'll give you $1 billion if I can experiment on your child," you're living in a much better house and you're not, doing the pageant, which is in its own way Vought's own catch there, because obviously if the child grew up in a big mansion without ever doing the pageants, they're not going to become a superhero. She's just a girl that can warm up her hot cocoa with her hand. That's not useful to Vought. So you got to keep them hungry. But that's the thing. It's like obviously, if you really want to make a point about it, it's like it would be better if these were children that were sick and getting superpowers. But that's not the case, because obviously, you're not going to run the risk of giving a sick kid this stuff that might kill him.
Yeah, and now that you mention it in that light, it also reminds me of the base story of the video game Halo, where the alien forces have attacked and humans are having trouble fighting it. So out of the necessity of fighting this alien horde, they start a program where they kidnap children with a genetic marker that will be able to handle the process they're about to go through, which is genetic enhancement, biological enhancement, and they get turned into these super elite super soldiers called Spartans, and they win the war for humanity. But it's sort of in that same vein. It just made me think of that.
Yeah, well, and for what it's worth, it's entirely possible that there's something similar going on here, where Vought is really looking out there for who can handle the super soldier serum, and
which leads us to the introduction, finally, of Edgar.
Yeah.
Gus Fring.
Yeah, and hey. Real props to Amazon to saying maybe he's a black guy.
Yeah, and they picked what an actor. I mean, we don't get too much of him just yet, but I think next season it's going to be great, because that guy's a phenomenal actor. If you've seen Breaking Bad ever, That guy's incredible.
No.
And what made me think of it now is like, so, we know what Madeline's intentions are. We get a sense that we might know what Vaught's intentions are, but we don't know anything about Edgar or what his intentions are. And maybe you're right. Maybe there's something to that he sees a looming threat that nobody knows about yet, and he's preparing. And this is just a crucible through which he finds his heroes.
Yeah, or, well, like I said, I don't know about threats that he sees, but essentially, the biggest threat was always Homelander. And here's what I'm going to tell you. If someone sees a threat and you're involved, and you're a guy that's thinking 4 moves ahead, you should be Lex Luthering the heck out of Homelander the whole time. Because to call a shelter half an entrenching tool, Homelander was, is, and will always be a threat. And this is why I always get back to that question of zinc. The one thing he can't see through. That there's one limitation, and here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's what I'm going to tell you. In this episode, we actually get where Homelander tells Madeline, he went back to Vogelheim and squeezed the information out of him. And here's the thing. I don't know if Vogelheim is the kind of guy who just lets data sit on his hard drive. Vogelbaum, sorry.
Yeah.
Pardon my...
So, I mean, he had to physically squeeze the information out of him, I imagine. That's what I thought.
No. Yeah, but what I meant is, I don't think Vogelbaum's notes are... That's the thing, he's a scientist. He made notes. Every aspect of Homelander's existence exists somewhere. Now, maybe they exist on a hard drive that Edgar has access to. Maybe they were notes that Vogelbaum has access to. But at the end of the day, there's notes on Homelander, including what might be his weaknesses. And they make this point and here's the thing. They keep on making the point, their weakness is the same as us. It's the people they care about. But then what if you have a sociopath superhero? Except then, well, maybe there is still something that's his weakness, It's like It's like in the real world, you know what a sociopath's one weakness is?
What?
Bullets.
Oh.
It's bullets, my one weakness. Well, knives too, Tristan. Yes, thank you for correcting. And that's the thing. It's like here's the thing. In order not to basically murder a too powerful soup once you create one, the impetus has to be, well, how will we murder it at some point? Now, I could be overthinking it because I do think like a supervillain. Just like I always used to say, you don't build a building without thinking about how you're going to take that building down someday. I think the clones would beat the stormtroopers. The stormtroopers can't shoot straight. The clone troopers seem to have a really good skill at shooting. Anyway. Yes. Okay, Tristan, just watch your show. No, it's okay. I can't talk about 2 shows at once, Tristan. That's the only problem. When we talk Mandalorian, you can hop back in. Anyway, yeah. But
I think from there we can go to the boys in their little hideout.
Yes.
And that storyline. So Butcher takes Huey with him, and somebody gets the drop on the rest of them.
Well, yeah, and Butcher basically gets the information that that Vought wanted them, and the DOJ said fine, which is politics as it is. I'm not even gonna say it's unrealistic because it's whatever. They've decided they're gonna go this route. Honestly, I think that here's what I'm gonna say. And again, just because I have a supervillain mindset, I gotta say that the CIA isn't worried about Stoops prior to this moment, or everyone got scared just because Mallory's kids got torched. Honestly, I gotta think that people would be way more invested, that the government is going to be way more invested in this conversation prior to this, but then maybe the government's run by, basically a bunch of dumb guys who
Right.
gets lucky into running a country, rather than actually being a supervillainous organization dedicated
Or
to ruling the world.
or they just collected the most money from donors, or won the contest to pretend to be the one in control.
Well, yeah, it's, control is relative. And again, like I always say, here's what I'll say. It's like a guy like Homelander, you wonder what would happen if that entire, SEAL Team 27
Hmm.
decided to just say, no, Homelander, stand down. We're running this out. And he decides to fight them. And yeah, he might be able to laserize a few, but, a dozen well trained soldiers, he's bulletproof, but then again, what kind of bullets do these guys have? It's all these kind of like more complex questions that if we knew we were going into this fight, what would we have? Would we
Yeah.
have something sort of like when they make the hypercarbide bullet to pierce translucent skin? Now, granted, they shot it because they were idiots, because they didn't cover him with paint first so they could actually aim it. Because he's in a cage, it wouldn't be that hard to shoot it at him if you knew where the heck he was. And then the fact that it reflects off of stuff is just ridiculous, because it shouldn't have. Because it's going to be harder than anything in that room, unless steel is actually harder than translucent skin, in which case, just shoot him with a freaking, full metal jacket, and then we're good. But anyway, I digress. That's going back to earlier in the season, folks. Go back and watch it. It's fun. I think it was episode 2. Was it episode 2 where they blow up translucent, or was that still in episode 1? That might
I
have been
think it
episode
might
1.
even have been episode 3.
No, I gotta think they blow up We're only 8 episodes in, Mozz. They covered a lot real quick.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
true.
one of the reasons why we blended these last
I
2
was
episodes
surprised
together.
when they killed him, because I was like, hey, that's a really, really interesting and fun character. That's what I was like, and he was there for a while, so I was the idea that he could die had sort of dissolved away from me. That's why I think it might have been more than 3 episodes, or more than.
At the end of the day, he's kind of just, I think League of Extraordinary Gentlemen came out first, where they did the Invisible Man in a similar way. Although, to be fair, the original H.G. Wells story actually does look at that idea. What if no one could see you and you could do whatever you want? I mean, I'd like to think H.G. Wells was a little less sexual, because it was the Victorian era. But then again, you never know. Or it might have been the Elizabethan era. I don't know. But it was early 20th century, and there was some sticky wickets about. But but anyway, so yeah, that's translucent.
So Huey gets himself caught on purpose.
He does.
And they have such a great scene where Frenchie is beside himself. That is the silliest bit of bravery I've ever seen. That is you've completely given your life away.
Yeah, but what I love about that is that it's like, no, I have an actually plan, which is, it says you can pick a lock with anything, which again, super big assumption. That this random piece of wire is going to pick whatever lock they're locked in with.
Right. And you gambled your life on it.
Yeah, exactly. But, hey, I mean, it works out great because it says superhero logic. So beautiful. We'll allow it.
Right.
But in this moment, he makes that choice to, I love you. Makes the choice to go into this thing. And basically, he fixes a retainer into his mouth, so it looks like just normal bridge work. Which I don't think it would, but whatever. I guess, again, you don't pay the best for these guards. This kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
These are basically guys who couldn't cut it in the military, and now they get to hold guns for a living because a government's going to pay them. Well, not a government, but a company's going to pay them to hold guns, and probably dock them hours for vacation time. So it's like Vaught's not pulling in Union troops.
Right.
That's what you got to remember about mercenaries. They ain't Union. This ain't the Star Wars universe where there's an entire guild to handle the bounty hunters and the mercenaries. These are people that are basically washed out of the military got hired by Vought to be their shock troop. And basically, Vaught's the guys who are going to look the other way because they don't have to pay you as much. Because it's a bottom line question. Not now. No, come on, Tristan.
I love you.
I love you too. Go. Well, it's you. You can see I'm podcasting. Let me podcast. I love you too, buddy. I don't mind hugging you and telling you you're loved and all that kind of stuff, but we're in the middle of the podcast. Yes, especially when you want to talk about what you happen to be watching on a show that no one else is watching right now. Anyway, moving right along. So they let him get in with the thing. They had to punch the thing out of his face because it's comedy. That's the only reason for it.
Right.
I don't know how strong Fixidence is. I know you can fix it and forget it, but I also happen to think that I've seen Fixident because my mom had dentures. I don't think it's nearly that impressive. But they do knock it out of his mouth, and then they have the retainer, and they can do that. And again, I don't know why punching him would have necessarily knocked it out of his mouth, but okay. I'll allow it.
I mean, it's like the tool only knows what it does, right? So he knows how to punch people, and he's like, hey, I think that might work. Yeah. I know how to do this. I know how to punch someone.
Well, there you go. And fair enough, it worked. It worked. And then the other tool knows how to pick locks, and the tool knows how to show up and be completely unassuming. And of course, that's the real story, is that Huey's power is he is the real Invisible Man. Because it took everyone so long to remember, oh, that's who that was. Because he can just walk right in. It's the old, this was always my big anger point with Michael Bay's Transformers. When they made Bumblebee a Camaro.
Yeah.
Because Bumblebee was a Volkswagen Bug. And a Volkswagen Bug never arouses suspicion. Because it was a car that could be at pretty much from any era. And you'd see a bug and you'd go, oh, look, it's a bug. And then you'd walk right past it. You wouldn't think anything weird or nefarious about a bug. And you wouldn't think it was out of place anywhere you went. Because a rich guy could have a bug, a poor guy could have a bug. Bugs were just things that existed. And then they make him a Camaro, and the Camaro was immediately going to attract your attention. And no way in the world is the Camaro the cheapest car on any lot. I'm just going to say that right now. But Huey is the Volkswagen VW bug of, which he doesn't say Volkswagen VW, but yes. He is the bug of humans. And you don't think anything weird when you see him, because he's just some dude walking in. He's not physically intimidating, so he's not like Mother's Milk walking in and say, who's that large black man?
Or, not to get political, but, or like A-Train out of his costume in crutches, being under suspicion of stealing something.
And that's a great scene, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, just to emphasize the weight of who these people are and why they're so desperate.
Yeah, that and to make it a point that how badly being the best is important to A-Train, that without his powers, without his notoriety, he doesn't get the respect he should.
Well, exactly, and you wouldn't, and that's the truth of that thing. I mean, I know that they break very much from the comics, and this is the thing. One thing the Incredible Hulk TV series from the 70s and 80s taught us is that if you break from the comics and you tell a good story, no one's gonna mind. That's the one thing I'm kind of learning in this later half of the first decade of the 20th century. For all the internet outrage out there, when the story is good, people will, even the trolls can't argue, and that I think is the most fascinating aspect of the whole story, is that when the story is good enough, the trolls can't argue. And, I think that one of the aspects with A-Train is that, yes, he is so desperate to keep what he has. Because he is, he's basically a Major League ball player who...
Right.
And it's like, and here's the thing, you can be Reggie Jackson, who can start at the top of his career and then slowly work his way down. And Reggie Jackson, by the end of his career, was not doing as well as he was at the start of his career. But he had a really long career as a pro ball player, And I think Bob Uecker, who played with Reggie Jackson, used to say, it's like, we actually, Reggie Jackson started with higher stats than me, but we both wound up at the same place.
Mm.
But that's a long career for both of them because they both basically, Bob Uecker was a guy who was just, he had that long career as a guy, as a catcher, just that long career as a catcher with, middle of the road stats, doing just fine, continued his career, and Reggie Jackson was the superstar and then became the mediocre player, as all players do in time, because you can only be the best player for so long.
Of course.
And the idea for A-Train is that, he got to the majors, and now he's so afraid of being traded down to the farm team, especially as there isn't really a farm team that we've seen in this world. We haven't seen the G-Men. We haven't seen...
Right.
And of course, what you saw was he was part of the teen brigade, which means he was in the farm team with Mesmer and Popcorn. He's the one that got called up to the 7. And what we see is that we don't see the G-Men. We don't see a new teen brigade. We don't see a farm team for the superheroes, which is really Vaught's problem. But again, at the same problem, every time they create a superhero, they run the risk of creating a supervillain. That is their basic problem with this, is that it's an unsustainable model. I mean, and basically that's the problem with created superpowers. It's an unsustainable model if it's not a one shot and super soldier done. It's like Captain America, one shot and you get a super soldier, and it's great because he's a reasonably leveled super soldier, and you could make everyone a super soldier, and then it's not so much of a problem. But the idea that we can randomly distribute superpowers, some of these guys are going to have amazing powers. Some of these guys are going to be stretchy. It's not a good business model for Vought. Now they've managed to find a way to work this niche into a profit margin, but it's like Netflix. It's always teetering on the edge of ability. It's a great idea until someone steals it. And what they never imagined was that freaking Homelander was going to steal it.
Right.
And Homelander said, "Here, you get some Compound V, and you get some Compound V. Everyone gets Compound V." And then we're going to see what happens next. And we will see what happens next episode, whenever that drops in 2020. But in the meantime, of course, Butcher tries to exploit Homelander's weakness.
What he thinks is one weakness, but he doesn't realize he's dealing with Kaiser Soze.
Well, he doesn't realize he's dealing with an actual sociopath.
Right. Because you remember in The Usual Suspects, Kaiser Soze, the myth that Verbal Kint tells in the FBI's office is that the bad guys came into his house and held his family up to gunpoint and said, if you don't give up your territory, we're going to kill your family. And he takes out his gun and shoots his wife and his 2 kids in the head and says, now what are you going to do? Yeah. As an explanation of how crazy and insane Kaiser Soze was.
Yeah, and to be fair, that's kind of the social pathology you need to be, it's an interesting question about the myth of the sociopath. The sociopath, I mean, it's an actual mental condition. Me and Tristan were having a discussion about the difference between sociopath and psychopaths. I'm not sure there's a clinical definition, but I always felt that the central definition should be that a sociopath is, at its core, a human without human associations that is unable to, and I want to say unable, I will say unwilling to form human bonds with other humans, but that a psychopath is a sociopath whose inability to form social bonds stem from a psychological dissociation from reality. Essentially, I've created a universe of myself, and that's why I will not allow myself to bond, rather than a sociopath who simply is unable to form the bond. Now, in that sense, a psychopath is more dangerous, but a psychopath is also much more likely to be defeated because, they have dissociated themselves from reality. Whether or not Homelander is a psychopath and that he is dissociated from reality in that sense that he does not imagine someone could be a threat to him, or a sociopath in that he is aware of reality but just does not feel the need to bond, is a real question. I actually think he is a psychopath because I do feel that he is but that's the thing. He's unaware of a reality that could harm him because he's never experienced.
Right.
So in that, although at the same time they kept him in a little box most of his life.
Right. So he is a product of the evil hearts of the people who created him. And the people who created him, by and large, is us as society.
Well, I don't know if us. It's so much as what I will say is, here's what I will say. He was kept in a box, which suggests he felt powerless. He felt powerless most of his life. And then once he had power, and it's the old, it's I don't know if it's true or not, but there's the myth that, you can tie a rope around an elephant's ankle when they're a child, and they will try to break from the rope, but that at a certain point, they'll give up. And then when they're an adult and they can more than easily break the rope, they won't even try, because they already tried breaking the rope when they were a child and they were weaker. They don't realize they've gotten stronger. Now, Homelander, arguably, is a being that was kept in the room when he was weaker and has grown to this point where he doesn't even question his position because he knows it. But now we're seeing that now he thinks, he realized he can, as he does kill Vogelbaum and he does kill Madeline. People who had power over him, he no longer feels weak around.
See, to me, it was like, I think whatever he felt for Madeline and whatnot, I think that was real. And I think he is capable of feeling attachment and emotion because of the way he reacted when his quote-unquote Dr. Father told him, "You were my biggest failure." The look on his face in that moment, like it meant something to him. So he's closed himself off and doesn't allow himself to feel because of the pain he experienced, but I still think he can feel. And in that moment, the emotion that he is riding is incredulity and arrogance and blinding rage at the fact that someone would even think that he could have a weakness. Yeah. And couple that with the perceived betrayal on her part, and he's like, "Oh yeah, well, tell you what, I've learned at a young age that attachments aren't going to get you anywhere. So how dare you even think?" And then just the satisfaction of that moment where he at first walked in is completely being, acquiescing to Butcher's control and saying, "Hey, what do you want? Let's figure this out." And it's all a cat and mouse game, and he's been waiting for this moment. And I love that when he does it, he takes a moment to mourn his friend's death, and then turns around and takes a moment to lick his lips for how delicious this moment is, that he has given Butcher no out, that he has won. And then he turns around to Butcher and says, "Now what?"
And Butcher pushes the button.
Oof.
So,
Doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter, because even that he's thought about and he's planned ahead for.
Yeah.
So he's like, "No, you don't get to win. You think you get to win, and even if you think you're going to opt out and pretend that it's a win, I'm not even going to give you that satisfaction." Yeah. Oh, that's so evil.
Here's a question for you. And it's honestly, this is the question that racks my mind. Do you think Homelander saved the baby?
No, absolutely not.
And now here's question B. Do you think the baby survived anyway?
Ooh. But yeah, we don't know where that baby came from, whether it was even hers.
This is the thing. They turned
you think
the
that was
story
Homelander's baby?
Down. I know it's Homelander's baby.
Oh.
You think this woman who is clearly, repeatedly having the sexual relations with the Homelander, and that Homelander is just too dumb to even think it. And here's the crux of Yonder Biscuit that shows how dumb, how pathetic of a baby Homelander is. He doesn't even realize that's his kid. Because here's the thing. They told him, "Oh, you had a kid, and it tore itself out of its mother's womb, yada, yada, yada." But then he learns that's a lie. And then he learns, oh no, we actually set up Rebecca and the kid in a little house in Sandusky, Ohio. $5, Sandusky, Ohio. It's the amazement park. For his kid to be. And it never even dawns on him, wait a minute, I've been putting my sperm in that lady. Maybe that baby is my baby. Because they never suggest, because obviously it's meant to imply that she had a kid with a surrogate, or like, she, got some sperm somewhere. But we never hear about a Mr. Madeline, and we never hear that she got, a procedure done. Honestly, the idea that that kid isn't his kid is utterly ridiculous. It is utterly ridiculous. That kid is not his kid. So I guarantee you that kid is alive, and Homelander is just a moron. Which is why I think Homelander is going to get his comeuppance. Why I think they're going to give a redemption arc to, honestly, to the Deep. And yeah, Deep's going to die horribly. That's fine. But he's going to kill Homelander as he's killing him. You know
what I think is going to happen, because now that we're talking about it, I'm realizing that Homelander has just gained an ally that is maybe just as strong as him in his son. So now we're going to have to fight two Homelanders. So what I could see Deep doing is maybe killing baby Homelander or teenage Homelander.
Well, except that
who might become a threat.
Except that Homelander has a mom.
I'm sorry, what?
Homelander has a mom.
Right.
Homelander wasn't raised in a little steel box.
Right.
And so if we take Vogelbaum's words about if you raise the kid without their mom, they become cruel and evil.
Oh, so you think but just because it's his father, won't he be wowed and want to do whatever his father does, or?
Where the heck was his father this whole time?
Well, that's true, but he did when he tells him, "Hey, I'm your dad," and his eyes flash. The look on him is like, "Oh my God, my dad's here." It wasn't like,
"Oh my
Dad,
gosh, I'm gonna burn you with my laser eyes."
Is that the look you saw on his face? I thought I was smiling.
Know. Well, who wouldn't smile when you're about to shoot your dad with laser eyes after you went out for a pack of cigarettes and never came back?
That's interesting.
That's the thing. I think there's a lot more complexity to this story than we're even going to get. They're breaking away from the books because you have to. Because if you just told the story in the books, first off, every nerd's going to spoil it for everyone else. No one else is going to get to enjoy it. And the nerds themselves won't enjoy it because they said, well, yeah, that's what happened in the book.
Right.
So you have to change the book because we have to make this a new story. Because there's no sense in telling the same story the exact same way. When Shakespeare did it, people didn't see these plays all the time. So you could go around, you could do a Shakespeare show. And, it would come around to your town like once a month. And you're like, oh, no, man, this is great. Gotta watch this Macbeth one, man. This is the good one. And we'd all go and would watch Macbeth. And like, oh, that was amazing. And then you wouldn't see it for another couple years. It was like the Disney Vault. You wouldn't get Dumbo back, except for maybe like 10 years later, 5 years later, and you take someone else. Oh, I got to show you Dumbo. It's really great. It's really fun. And so when you're adapting a product like this, you have to say it's not going to be in the vault for 10 years, and we have to get people interested in this, which means we have to take whatever the essence of the story is, develop it, but then tell a completely different story so that no one knows what's going on. We've got to hit the beats right away that people are expecting. It's like good jazz, You're gonna play if you're gonna play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in a jazz motif, you still got to hit the right notes to let people know they're listening to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Indeed.
But if you don't go off on a riff to let them know it's jazz, then you're just playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Right.
And that's the idea. You got to go up and down and do some scales and throw it in there and mix up and play with the tempo, because that's the nature of jazz and that's the nature of storytelling. If you don't tell a story with some changes, it's going to get to be a boring story. No one wants to hear the story the same way every time, because not for nothing, we don't remember the story the same way every time. If you think about a story that's really important to you, and if you were to watch it again, you'd realize that parts that you thought were really important maybe weren't as important to the filmmaker. And the line that you thought was the important line, was a throwaway. And maybe because it was a throwaway is what made it sit with you. Sort of like where, well, to go back to Jessica Jones, where Patsy's mom is telling her to just throw the line away. When she says, and I'll never see 10 again. She says, every girl in that room is going to be doing a swoon. Throw that line away. And when she would throw that line away, that suddenly makes the line have more weight. Because if you did a big swoon on it, you wouldn't see it. But then when you go and watch it again, and in your mind, it's like, I'll never see 10 again. And you put the swoon in yourself, when you watch it again, you say, oh, she just threw that line away. But it still has so much meaning and so much weight. And so that's developing a comic book or a book or anything to a movie. You know, if you're going to do a remake, you have to look at those lines that were throwaways and know why those throwaway lines had so much meaning for people, and then understand how that structures the story that you tell now. So, but yeah, so that's where we leave it. Homelander wakes up Butcher, and I guarantee you, here's my predictions for season 2, Electric Boogaloo. That baby's dang well alive. In fact, you're going to see Edgar coming to the blown up world, the blown up apartment, the blown up house at the end of it. And, you know, just say, and see the baby sitting there going, and says, yes, I know. And pick the baby up and carry it off, you know, and Vogelbaum's dead. But they've got like 6 other scientists, man. There's a whole department for this sort of thing.
And Vogelbaum was retired at that point. He wasn't integral to the machine anyways.
Exactly. Edgar is not waiting for Homelander.
Yeah, I think that scene was cool with Homelander meeting his son, but the way more interesting moment was when Butcher locks eyes with was a dead wife that he thought might be alive, but truly believed was dead.
Yeah, and of course in that whole scene there's a lot of story too, because it's like, is she there by her own choice, and here's the thing, it's like it can have been a consensual moment, it could have been a mistake, or it could have been something no one anticipated, but then something else happened, and now we're in the situation where she's, what was that? She's raising Brightburn, you know? But,
right.
But maybe Brightburn's not a complete and total jerk in this universe, you know?
Right. And regardless of what was pushed onto her because of the circumstance, and, you know, she didn't want to leave Butcher, but she had to leave Butcher, but that doesn't absolve her of you know, messing around and what caused all this. So you can have a little bit of sympathy or pity for her, but, you know, not a whole lot.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. If it's a consensual messing around, there was probably problems with the Butcher relationship to start with. If nothing else, we know Butcher is not the nicest guy.
That's a fair point. And any sort of flashback we've gotten of their relationship has been through the rosy-tinted glasses of Butcher's own self-justified memories.
Exactly, my friend. And that's where you get the crux of the biscuit and the apostrophe of it all.
That's a really, really good point.
It's Butcher. What are you going to
do? Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what happens. I'm glad that, and here's the thing, I guarantee you, because we've gotten the trailer now for season 2, I think that freaking A-Train is in the hospital on the ventilator. I think the story that Starlight tells is, oh yeah, there was a big escape and I came to help A-Train, and then A-Train suddenly had a heart attack. Who knew? And I'm keeping him alive, you know. And I think that's the story. And as far as the other guards, first off, I think the guards are going to say, I don't know what happened. Because again, if you're some military washout who got this gig with Butt, and again, guarding non-superpowered prisoners, you know, who they're not searching properly. You think that you're going to go out on a limb to say, oh no, Starlight was with them and da-da-da. No, they're waiting for A-Train to come in to corroborate the story. They're like, I don't know, man. I don't know what happened. Suddenly, all of a sudden, I got blacked out. I think they maybe got one of those superpowered terrorists to help them.
Yeah, and for some reason, I don't see A-Train ratting on them either, because technically speaking, they saved his life.
Exactly. So I think that, and this is where I think you're going to get this rift in season 2. I'm going to be surprised if this gets 3 seasons. And I'm not going to feel bad about it because I think if they can tell a story in 2 seasons that has a dramatic crescendo, I don't think we need the 3rd season until someone thinks of what the 3rd season is going to be.
I agree.
You know, it's like maybe you tell 2 seasons and then call it a day, you know?
Yeah.
Not everything needs a sequel. Not everything needs to be an ongoing. Let's spend some money to develop another good story. Or if you want to stay in this universe, just start developing that 3rd story here, you know?
Right.
But you can...
Right. Oh, yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm sure they're thinking 3 seasons ahead, and they're planting seeds for the next 2 when we get the next season.
That's the problem with any kind of superpowered universe is once you introduce the idea of superpowers, suddenly suddenly reality changes because certain aspects of the laws of physics are changed and certain other aspects haven't. And the fact of the matter is, once Compound V is a thing, again, that is the real weakness of the business model. So when Vought says at the start of this, well, who cares where they got it? Vought should care where the heck they got it.
Right.
Vought should be like, oh my gosh, this proprietary secret's out there. And if anyone can create it, because not for nothing, I think it's not that hard to, I'm not going to say it's not that hard to reverse engineer a drug, because I'm sure it's wicked hard. But again, I'm not a chemist or, let alone a biochemist, but I guarantee you 20 biochemists in a room with a significant supply of Compound V could start mass producing it in a week,
Right.
Because it's like, well, okay, let's take this, let's see what's in it, let's figure out how the chemical is structured, let's put it under the electron microscope. And
not only that, but sometimes you don't even know how to get the molecule to take that structure unless you know some sort of proprietary process.
Well, but once you see what the structure is, you can start to figure. That's what reverse engineering is. You look at what it does, and then you figure out how it works.
Right, but don't you think there would be some sort of way, okay, you have to do this to this chemical in order to get the molecules to bind, and there might be some process that's even hidden at this point?
Well, no, there's a process, but at the same time, it's a process that exists within the laws of physics. So, and you think about how you can use CRISPR DNA kit, which you can buy on the internet, to create a cell, an amoeba that will start, spitting out some kind of organic molecule.
Right. But for what my point was, is it anything say, for example, if someone would take a gumbo or a roux that made the gumbo and pick out its integral parts, but they wouldn't be able to make the roux unless they knew that you had to put the butter in there first and then the flour and let it cook out until it changes color and then add the stock or water and then add the cream. You can have all the parts. Is there anything to that?
Well, let me put it to you like this. Okay, so we have 10 ingredients, let's say, for a roux, whatever a roux is.
A roux is basically just butter and okay.
Yeah. I know it's a soup stock kind of concept. So we have 10 ingredients that could possibly be in it, and there's an order in which it has to go in. But we have an infinite number of people that can start cooking it in an infinite number of ways. Or let's say there's 10 ingredients and we have 20 people who will start cooking it in a dozen different ways, at a dozen different temperatures, in a dozen different things, who all have some idea of how food is supposed to go together to start with.
Right.
And you're going to tell me we can't recreate
Coca-Cola's formula?
What?
Why has nobody guessed Coca-Cola's formula?
Well, actually, people have. They've actually. Not for nothing. It's Coca-Cola's. You don't make Coca-Cola. Because, simply put, because first off, no one's going to say it tastes like Coca-Cola if it's in a Coca-Cola bottle, unless it's in a Coca-Cola bottle. So when you make, Dr. Cola, or Sam's Cola, or whatever you're going to make. Yeah, or Shoutin' Mountain, which is the Sam's Club version of Mountain Dew that Tristan likes. Or Mountain Lightning, or any of the other groups. Actually, Shoutin' Mountain is the Stop and Shop version. Anyway, Mountain Lightning is the Sam's Club version. But you can know what's in it but because so much of the taste of Coca-Cola is the bottle it comes in,
Mm.
trying to make something that tastes like Coca-Cola will only taste like Coca-Cola. Whereas if you're going to make a cola drink, you're better off taking that basic cola formula and then making it slightly different in your own so that people say, well, actually, I like the taste of Sam's Cola. Or I like the taste of ShopRite Cola or Stop and Shop Cola or Dr. Cola or any other cola group that you're making it of. But not because that's really what it is, but just because it's easier to just make a knockoff that tastes different than to try and pass it off as the real thing. However, if your job was to make the real thing, I think making more Coca-Cola would not be hard.
Mm. I hear you. I hear you.
Because it is literally just cooking several ingredients that you can determine with several spectral analyses, figuring out what order to put them in, and then make your Coca-Cola. And once you recognize the idea that the presentation is half of the taste of Coca-Cola, you can make something that could be exactly chemically identical to Coca-Cola, and then put it in a Coca-Cola bottle, and everyone said, "Well, that tastes like Coke." But that wouldn't be Coca-Cola to people, So as far as recreating this drug, yes, I guarantee you, Soviet super soldiers or Russian super soldiers are going to be a real easy thing to get because, again, like one can point out, Homelander isn't that bright.
Mm.
And honestly, he probably picked A-Train because A-Train was desperate. In fact, I guarantee you, him bringing A-Train into the 7 at the start was part of his plan.
Wow.
Which is that idea that I needed someone who needed to be here. I needed a partner who I could trust couldn't betray me. So, I mean, these are all, mark my words, these are all revelations we're going to get next season.
I could see it. That makes sense.
Okay. Anyway, we're going a bit long here. We're over an hour for this episode.
I think we were for the last one, too. These last two were pretty good.
Well, they were really good. It's honestly, like I said, this should have been a 2-hour movie that you could just watch and enjoy. But let's talk about the final. So let's wrap up this episode, Mozz.
With our hardest working people in this episode, and then I guess.
Yeah.
For this episode, I'm going to say mine goes to Starlight's mom, Ann Cusick.
Yeah,
but overall, for the show, I think you were right.
Yeah.
Mr. Kripke deserves the eventual nod for the hardest working person in this show.
You know what I'll say, and here's what I'll say. Kripke may be a Stan Lee. He may be a guy who has a vision, or Thomas Edison. He has a vision. He gets other people to make it happen. That doesn't mean that Stanley and Thomas Edison weren't doing the work.
Right, and to the point of how many great acting performances there were in this season, it has a lot to do with the director creating the environment for you to do that and then guiding you to find the decisions that character has to make to arrive at that scene. And a good director can cause a lot of that to happen. And for it to have happened so often in this show speaks to how good of a director he is.
Yeah, or producer, yeah. Because he's,
right.
As I always say, the producer is an artist whose medium is other artists. And so I think that gives Kripke a nice bit. For just some fun moment here, I gotta say I want to give a little shout out to Black Noir, the character. Just when he starts playing the piano, it's really lovely. The actor who plays Black Noir is an actor by the name of Nathan Mitchell. He's the guy in the suit, and I don't know if he's an actual pianist, but I just love that scene. Pianist, the person who plays the piano. Pianist, yes. It's delightful and it's wonderful. I like the idea of just
like we don't know who he is or anything about him. All we know is that he's got like a deep well of experience and cultural knowledge, and you wonder where it comes from or what he's about. But he's got so much that he knows, but he hardly ever expresses himself.
I get the feeling he is kind of that. I get the feeling he is meant to be kind of a counterpoint to the female, because we know how the female can't speak, and Black Noir doesn't. And we see how, they both have human level powers, but at the same time, the peak of those both things. And I get the feeling that with Black Noir, we're looking at someone who is maybe something of a taskmaster kind of character, where he just amasses massive amounts of knowledge. He can't help it. But then at the same time, he's also trying to look for foci, which we see when he has the very ritualized moment where he's making his teeth. Where there's this whole ritual, because he needs that to be centered. In the same way that the female, when she starts, doing the painting her nails and really becoming human again, that's what makes her be human. So I get the feeling that we're going to see that the Black. In fact, I'm not going to say I'm going to mark my words on this, but if I'm going to go out on a limb on this, it wouldn't surprise me if we find out that the female and her brother both got the compound V.
Ooh.
And her
how
brother
fascinating.
became Black Noir, and she became the female, and Kimiko. And it wouldn't surprise me if the idea is that essentially they brought in her brother to be Black Noir, but that Kimiko is a person that Homelander targeted to say, give her this too. Let's see what that does. That's a possibility, although we hear that Vought doesn't do it with adults, so it doesn't necessarily work out unless her brother was given the chemical as a child and just developed as a super advanced child, and then eventually got brought into the Seven when he matured, So there's ways you can do it. And then maybe it's not quite as random as it seems with Homelander doing it. But yeah, there's a lot going on in there. But I just gotta say, I love that scene. And again, that's not the actor, that's not anything, it's the scene. Which again, I guess goes back to the writers of this piece, Rebecca Schonenstein and Kofo Saunders. And Eric Kripke just standing above everyone saying, make a good show. Make a good show, you guys. So I just got to give that shout out. I mean, it's just a phenomenally acted thing. It's amazing what can you do if you have like $8 billion to dominate an entire marketplace as Amazon does.
Indeed. Yeah. And you don't have to pay taxes.
Yeah, when you're lucky, yeah. No. Okay, Mozz. So I think we're at Ann Cusack. She's amazing. Eric Kripke, I think, gets it for the whole show. I mean, I know I wanted to do a whole award show episode, but I don't think we're going to get the chance to do that. I have big dreams for these podcasts.
Right. I think we covered all the big ones, all the important ones as we were going along.
Yeah, I think everyone got a shot at it at some point or another. Huey may never have, but that's why he's the Invisible Man, and that maybe is why Huey, who plays Huey, Jack Quaid, may really be the hardest working man in the show, because as the Invisible Man, he's never seen. But,
well, not only that, but sometimes you need a piece of bread for the burger to work opposite of, so you can notice how good the burger is. Exactly. So he's kind of like the straight man that everybody gets to have this wild character and still have it be somehow grounded in reality because there's a real character standing next to them.
Exactly. Okay. We've done so much here. This is just such a great show. I can't wait for the season 2 to just start. I don't know if we're going to cover it or not. We may be onto a completely different show by the time the boys come back. But
if it does, I think we should intersperse that in between whatever we're working on at the time.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a special, or maybe we'll start it up again.
Yeah.
You, the listeners, tell us what you think. In the meantime, Mozz, how can people find you?
Or they can email me at mozzmanzor at gmail.com, or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZ MANZOOR.
And of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way our moms and pa's once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. And of course, you can always follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet things when they're on broadcast television. At Charlie Esser, that's CHARLIE. Yes, SER. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality! Ding!
All right, me hearties. Ye lovable landlubbers, we have come to port, for the show is at an end. And though ye may disembark and find your own lives back where you left them, know that the next time you come, you may board again and come along with me and me first mate Mozz as we stream full stream ahead.
But keep
Arr!